The heart monitor flatlined with a sound that seemed to echo through eternity. I stood there, my hands still trembling with rage, staring at the man who had just taken his last breath. My father. The stranger. General Robert Morgan. The beeping stopped, and in that silence, I felt something crack inside me, not grief, but something darker. 28 years of lies, of abandonment, of a life stolen from me, all compressed into this single moment. And now he was gone, taking his secrets to the grave, leaving me with nothing but questions and a fury so hot it burned through my veins like acid. I know what you're thinking. How does a decorated Marine major end up standing over her dying father's bed with murder in her eyes? How does a woman who spent her entire adult life fighting for her country find herself at war with her own blood? If this story moves you, if you want to hear how I clawed my way from the ashes of betrayal to something resembling peace, hit that like button, subscribe to hear more, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever discovered a truth that shattered your entire world. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 weeks before that hospital room. 3 weeks before I learned that everything I thought I knew about myself was a carefully constructed lie. I was at home in Quantico, Virginia, in my private gym, working through my usual evening routine. Sweat dripped down my face as I drove my fists into the heavy bag, each punch precise, controlled, deadly. This was my meditation, my church. The rhythm of combat training kept me sane after 15 years in the Marine Corps, after 3 tours in Afghanistan, after seeing things that would break most people. I had built myself into a weapon forged in discipline and sacrifice, and I was proud of that. My phone buzzed on the bench. I ignored it. 5 more minutes. 5 more rounds. But it kept buzzing, insistent, demanding attention like an alarm I couldn't silence. When I finally picked it up, the caller ID showed an unknown DC number. I almost declined, but something made me answer. Maybe it was instinct, that sixth sense that kept me alive in Helmand Province when the Taliban ambushed our convoy. Maybe it was fate. The voice on the other end was male, professional, emotionless. Major Carter, this is Attorney Hayes. I represent General Robert Morgan. He's dying and he's requesting to see you. My blood went cold. The heavy bag swayed behind me, forgotten. You have the wrong number. Elena Grace Morgan, born March 15, 1997, at Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. Daughter of General Robert Morgan and Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, formerly Sarah Brennan. I assure you, Major, I have the right number. I hung up. My hands were shaking and I hated myself for it. Marine don't shake. We don't falter. But hearing those names I'd spent my entire life trying to forget, brought back memories I'd buried deeper than any IED. I walked over to my bedroom, to the small, locked box I kept in the back of my closet. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside was everything I had left from before the Johnsons adopted me when I was 3 years old. A hospital bracelet too small for my wrist now with the name EGM, printed in faded ink. A photograph, edges curled and yellowed with age, showing a man in marine dress blues holding a baby. And a silver locket shaped like an eagle, engraved with the words, "For EGM, always safe." I picked up the photograph, studying the man's face for the 1,000th time. I'd always assumed this was some random Marine, maybe a friend of my parents who died in the car crash that supposedly killed them. But now, looking at his squared jaw, his steel gray eyes, I saw something I'd never noticed before. I saw my own reflection staring back at me. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows dance across the plaster. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up and opened my laptop. I typed General Robert Morgan into the search bar. The results were overwhelming. Decorated war hero, Vietnam veteran, Silver Star recipient, commander of multiple Marine expeditionary units, a legend in military circles. His official biography mentioned a wife, Sarah, who died in a car accident in 1999. No mention of children. No mention of a daughter named Elena. I spent hours reading everything I could find. Battle citations, interviews, photographs spanning decades. And in one photo from 1991, I saw him holding an infant in a hospital, his face soft with something that looked almost like love. The caption read, General Morgan visiting wounded Marines and their families at Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth. The date was 3 days after my birthday. I booked a flight to DC the next morning. I told myself I was going to confront this attorney, to tell him to stop harassing me, to threaten legal action if necessary. But the truth was, I needed answers. I needed to know why a dying general was claiming to be my father, why my entire childhood felt like a ghost story with missing pages. The law office was in Georgetown, one of those old brick buildings that screamed old money and older secrets. I showed up unannounced, still in my workout gear, carrying nothing but my military ID and a fury that had been building for 12 hours straight. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked right past her. I'd stormed Taliban compounds. A secretary wasn't going to slow me down. Attorney Hayes looked up from his desk as I burst through the door. He was in his late 50s, gray hair perfectly combed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. But his eyes were tired, sad, even like he'd seen too much and wished he could unsee it all. "I need to know what the hell is going on," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. "And I need to know now." He stood, slowly gestured to a chair. "Please sit down, Major." "I'll stand." "Talk." He opened a folder on his desk, pulled out documents, and slid them across to me. The first was a birth certificate. Elena Grace Morgan, born March 15, 1997. Father Robert James Morgan. Mother Sarah Elizabeth Morgan. I grabbed it, my hands crinkling the paper. This is bullshit. My parents died when I was 2. Car accident on I-95. I grew up in foster care until the Johnsons adopted me when I was 3. "That's the story we told," Hayes said quietly. "To protect you." "Protect me from what?" He pulled out another document. This one was stamped classified in red ink across the top. I recognized the format. Military intelligence reports. He shouldn't have been showing me this, and we both knew it. In 1991, your father led a rescue operation in Kuwait during Desert Storm. Operation Amber Torch. They extracted a group of Americans being held by an Iraqi intelligence cell. The mission was successful, but it created enemies. Powerful enemies who wanted revenge. I scanned the document, my training kicking in automatically, pulling out key details. Names. Dates. Threat assessments. And there in the casualty report section, I saw it. 1 civilian casualty, Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, killed in vehicular accident November 7, 1999. Investigation inconclusive. Inconclusive, I repeated the word, tasting like poison. "You mean murder." Hayes nodded. "Your mother wanted to bring you back into her life. She was tired of hiding. 2 months after she contacted your father about custody arrangements, her car went off the Potomac River Bridge. The investigation found brake line tampering, but the case was closed due to lack of evidence and national security concerns. I felt something break inside me. Not the dramatic shattering you see in movies, but a quiet fracture like ice cracking on a frozen lake. And my father, the great General Morgan, what did he do? He made sure you disappeared. Completely. He erased your connection to him, created a new identity, placed you with a family who had no ties to the military. He thought if they couldn't find you, they couldn't hurt you. I grabbed the birth certificate, and in my anger, I tore it. Not intentionally, but my hands were shaking so badly that a corner ripped off. I stared at the damage at my name, Elena Grace Morgan, now split in 2. "He abandoned me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "He let them kill my mother, and then he abandoned me." "He's dying," Hayes said. "Stage 4 lung cancer. He has maybe a week. He wants to see you. He wants to explain." I placed the torn birth certificate on his desk, smoothed it out with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. "Tell him I'll come. Not because I forgive him. Not because I understand. But because I deserve the truth. The whole truth." I left the office and walked for hours through D.C. Past the monuments, the memorials, the marble testaments to honor and sacrifice. Everything I'd built my life on. Everything I'd believed in. And now I had to face the possibility that it was all built on lies. 2 days later, I stood in front of the Morgan estate in Arlington. It was massive colonial style with white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn. An American flag hung at half-mast, already mourning a man who wasn't quite dead yet. The irony wasn't lost on me. Hayes met me at the door. "Welcome home, Major." "This isn't my home." He led me through a hallway that felt more like a museum than a residence. Every wall was covered with portraits. Morgans in uniform spanning back to the Civil War. Generations of military service, of honor, of sacrifice. And at the end of the hall, in a place of prominence, was a portrait of me. I stopped dead. It was me in my dress blues, standing at attention, the Navy Cross on my chest from the operation in Sangin, where I'd saved 6 Marines under heavy fire. But I'd never posed for this painting. I'd never authorized it. "Who the hell commissioned this?" I demanded. "Your father. 3 years ago, after you received the Navy Cross. He said it was for his daughter." I felt bile rise in my throat. I grabbed a curtain from a nearby window and threw it over the painting, covering it completely. I'm not his daughter. I'm a stranger he abandoned. Hayes didn't argue. He just led me deeper into the house to a bedroom on the second floor. The door was open, and I could hear the steady beep of a heart monitor the hiss of an oxygen machine. I stepped inside and there he was. The man from the photograph. Older now, his face hollowed by disease, his body a shadow of what it must have been. But those eyes, those steel-gray eyes that matched my own, were still sharp, still alert. He looked at me and his cracked lips formed words that hit me like a physical blow. You have your mother's eyes. I walked to his bedside, every muscle in my body tense. Why? Why did you do this? His voice was weak, barely audible over the machines. It was the only way to keep you alive. My world was too dangerous for a child. Your world, I leaned down close enough to see every line on his face, every year of lies etched into his skin. Do you know how I grew up? Do you know what it's like to be a kid without parents? To bounce between foster homes, to wonder every single day why nobody wanted you. I spent my entire childhood thinking I was broken, that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't worth loving. And the whole time you were here, living in this mansion, building a museum to your guilt. He tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled back. I tried to protect you. You could have told me later. When the danger passed. When I was old enough to understand. The danger never passed. I grabbed the framed photograph of my mother from his nightstand. She was beautiful, smiling, wearing her lieutenant's uniform with pride. Mom would never have agreed to this. Never. His eyes filled with tears, the first real emotion I'd seen from him. She didn't. She wanted to bring you home. She was going to fight for custody. And they killed her for it. I felt my control slipping. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing through me. Instead, I threw the photograph back onto the nightstand, not hard enough to break it, but hard enough to make my point. You're a coward. You hid behind duty and honor, but you were just afraid. Afraid to fight for us. Afraid to be a real father. A tear rolled down his cheek. I know. I turned to leave, but Hayes stopped me at the door. He handed me a sealed envelope. He asked me to give you this. He said to read it only when you were ready. I didn't take it. I'll never be ready. For the next 3 days, I threw myself into investigation. I wasn't going to take anyone's word for anything anymore. I went to the Marine Corps archives, pulled every file I could access on Operation Amber Torch. I found casualty reports after action reviews, intelligence assessments. Everything Hayes had told me checked out, but I needed more. I tracked down a former sergeant major who had served under my father, a man named Thomas Garrett, who now lived in a small house in Alexandria. He'd been my father's right-hand man for 20 years before retiring. When I showed up at his door, he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. I knew your mother, he said, inviting me inside. She was one of the best intelligence officers I ever worked with. Smart, brave, dedicated. We sat in his living room surrounded by memorabilia from his service. I cut straight to it. Tell me how she really died. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. There are things I swore never to talk about. I leaned forward, pulling out my Navy Cross and placing it on his coffee table. I'm a Marine. I don't abandon my own. My mother was part of this story. If you know something, you have to tell me. He looked at the medal, then at me, and I saw the moment he decided to break his silence. There was a faction within the intelligence community. Officers who were using their positions for personal gain. Arms deals, mostly. Selling weapons to the highest bidder, including some of our enemies. Your mother stumbled onto evidence of it during her work on Operation Amber Torch. She was going to report it. And my father, did he know? He found out after she died. He started his own investigation, but he was blocked at every turn. These weren't just any officers. They had power connections, friends in high places. He couldn't touch them without solid evidence, and every time he got close, the trail went cold. So he hid me instead of fighting for justice. Garrett shook his head. He hid you to keep you alive. And then he spent the next 25 years gathering evidence. Everything he could find. He knew he couldn't take them down while he was alive, but he could leave enough for someone else to finish it. For you to finish it. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. A glimpse of a bigger picture I'd been too angry to see. Where's the evidence? I don't know. He kept that secret even from me. But if I had to guess, he left you instructions. Probably in something he knew you'd find. I went back to the estate that evening. My father was worse. The doctors said he had maybe 48 hours left. I walked into his room with a different energy this time, not rage but grim determination. He opened his eyes when I sat down. You came back. I need to know everything. About Mom's death. About the people who killed her. About what you've been doing for the last 25 years. His breathing was labored, each word an effort. In the desk. My study. There's a false bottom in the bottom right drawer. Inside is a USB drive. Everything's on it. Names. Evidence. Enough to bring them down. Why didn't you do it yourself? Because they were watching me. Always watching. But you were hidden. Safe. They don't know you exist. You can do what I couldn't. I pulled the locket from around my neck, the one I'd worn every day since I was old enough to understand it was important. Mom gave me this, didn't she? Not you. The last thing she did before she died was make sure you had it. She said it would keep you safe. For EGM, always safe. She was right. It did. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I spent my entire life thinking nobody loved me, that I was disposable. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. And I loved you the only way I knew how, by keeping you alive. That's not love. That's cowardice. He closed his eyes. I know. I sat there for a long time watching him breathe, watching the numbers on the monitors slowly decline. And I realized that I had a choice. I could leave right now, let him die with this chasm between us, or I could stay and bear witness to the end of a complicated, broken man. I'm not doing this for you, I said finally. I'm doing it for Mom. And for me, because I deserve to know who I really am. Semper Fi, he whispered. Don't. I stood up, my hands clenched into fists. You don't get to use that. You don't get to claim brotherhood when you spent your whole life pushing us away. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely fair. He had been faithful in his own twisted way. Faithful to a mission. Faithful to a promise. Just not faithful to the people who needed him most. I left his room and went to the study. The desk was massive mahogany, probably older than I was. I found the drawer he mentioned, felt along the bottom until I found a seam. The false bottom lifted easily, revealing a USB drive and a sealed envelope. I plugged the drive into the computer. Files filled the screen. Hundreds of them. Intelligence reports. Financial records. Audio recordings. Photographs. Evidence spanning 2.5 decades of systematic corruption and murder. Names I recognized, high-ranking officers, some still in active service. And there in a folder labeled, "For Elena," was a video file. I clicked it. My father appeared on screen, looking healthier than he did now, but still worn down by time and secrets. He spoke directly to the camera, directly to me. If you're watching this, then I'm gone and you found the truth. Elena, I won't ask for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I made choices that destroyed our family. I chose duty over love, safety over connection. I told myself it was noble that I was protecting you, but the truth is I was afraid. Afraid of losing you the way I lost your mother. Afraid of failing again. So I took away your chance to know me, to know your mother, to know where you came from. That was selfish. That was wrong. His voice cracked and I saw him wipe his eyes. On screen, this giant of a man, this decorated general, looked small and broken. Your mother died because she was brave enough to stand up to corruption. She died because she believed in doing the right thing no matter the cost. I want you to finish what she started. I've given you everything you need to bring these people to justice. But Elena, I don't want revenge to consume you the way it consumed me. I don't want you to spend your life chasing ghosts. Use this evidence, expose the truth, and then let it go. Build a life. Find happiness. Be everything your mother and I should have been but couldn't. He paused, staring into the camera with those eyes that looked so much like mine. I love you, sweetheart. I've loved you every single day since you were born. Even when I couldn't be there. Even when I made the worst choices a father could make. I hope someday you can understand that love doesn't always look the way it's supposed to. Sometimes it looks like letting go. I'm sorry I let go too soon and held on too long. Semper Fidelis, my darling girl. Always faithful. Even when I wasn't faithful to you. The video ended. I sat there in the dark study surrounded by decades of military history, and I finally let myself cry. Not for the father I never knew, but for the mother who fought for me. For the childhood I lost. For all the years of wondering if I was worthy of love. I stayed up all night going through the files. By dawn, I had a plan. I copied everything onto a secure drive, made backups, and started reaching out to contacts I had in military intelligence. People I trusted. People who owed me favors from my time in Afghanistan. 2 days later, my father died. I was in his room when it happened. Hayes had called me, said it was time. I almost didn't go, but something pulled me back to that bedside one last time. His breathing had become irregular, the spaces between breaths growing longer. I sat in a chair by the window, not holding his hand, but not leaving either. I'm going after them, I told him, even though I wasn't sure he could hear me anymore. Everyone who hurt Mom. Everyone who forced you to make those choices. I'm bringing them into the light. That's your legacy now. Not this house, not your medals. Justice. His eyes opened slightly. He looked at me, and I saw something that might have been peace. Or maybe just relief that it was finally over. I won't let you die thinking I forgive you, I said, and my voice was steady, cold. I don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I understand now. You were broken too. We're all just broken people trying to do the best we can with the worst situations. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it explains it. He tried to speak but couldn't. Instead, his hand moved slightly, reaching toward me. I looked at it, that trembling hand, and after a long moment I took it. Not as forgiveness, but as goodbye. Semper Fidelis, I whispered. For Mom. His lips moved, forming the words love you, and then the heart monitor went flat. That long, endless beep that marks the end of everything. Hayes handed me the folded flag from the foot of the bed. He wanted you to have this. I took it, held it against my chest, and made a promise. Not to my father, but to myself and to my mother's memory. No one is getting away with this. The funeral was held at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. I stood in the back away from the other mourners, watching as they played taps and fired the 21-gun salute. Senators were there. Generals. Politicians. People who probably knew exactly what had happened to my mother and did nothing. Hayes found me after the ceremony. He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a lieutenant's insignia, polished to a high shine. He said this was for the daughter who surpassed his courage. I closed the box without taking it out. I'll never know if that's true. There's one more thing. Hayes pulled out another envelope different from the first. This is a key and account information. Your father set up a trust. It's substantial. He wanted you to use it however you saw fit. Blood money. Legacy money. What you do with it defines what it becomes. Over the next 6 months, I worked the case like I'd worked missions in Afghanistan. Methodically. Ruthlessly. I met with investigators, provided evidence, testified before closed military tribunals. The conspiracy ran deeper than even my father knew. 12 officers, 4 civilians, all part of a network that had been operating for over 30 years. They tried to discredit me. They tried to make it look like I was a bitter daughter seeking revenge. But the evidence was too strong. Bank records, recorded conversations, shipping manifests. My father had been meticulous, and his documentation was bulletproof. One by one they fell. Courts-martial, dishonorable discharges, prison sentences. And in one case, a retired major general who chose to eat his gun rather than face justice. The Washington Post ran the story as a front-page exclusive. Military corruption ring exposed by fallen general's daughter. They called me a hero. I didn't feel like one. I felt hollow. 8 months after my father's death, I requested a transfer. I couldn't stay in Quantico anymore, surrounded by memories and questions. The Marine Corps offered me a position at Camp Lejeune, working with the Family Readiness Program, helping military families navigate the challenges of service life. I took it. And I took my father's blood money, his legacy, and I created something he never could. The Sarah Morgan Foundation for Military Children. A scholarship program for kids who'd lost parents in service. For kids like me who grew up wondering if they mattered. I held the first award ceremony at a community center in Jacksonville. 20 kids received full-ride scholarships to college. 20 kids who would never have to wonder if they were worthy of investment. One little girl, maybe 6 years old, came up to me after the ceremony. She was wearing a too big Marine Corps t-shirt that had probably belonged to her dad. "Are you a real Marine?" she asked. "I am. Did your daddy die too?" "In a way, yes." She thought about that for a moment. "My counselor says it's okay to be sad and mad at the same time." I knelt down to her level. "Your counselor is very smart." "What's your name?" "Emma." "Well, Emma, I'm going to tell you something important. Your dad loved you. Even if he's not here, even if it hurts that love doesn't go away. And someday when you're older, you're going to do something amazing to honor him. Not because you have to, but because that love has to go somewhere. She hugged me then, this tiny stranger who understood loss in a way most people never would. And I hugged her back, thinking about my mother, about the love she'd fought for, about the price she'd paid. That night I drove out to Chesapeake Bay. I'd been here once before years ago on a rare moment of leave. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of place where you could think without the noise of the world drowning out your thoughts. I sat on the beach watching the sun set over the water, holding my father's flag in my lap. I'd been carrying it with me everywhere, unable to let it go, but unable to display it either. I get it now, I said to the empty beach, to my parents' ghost, to whatever part of me was still that 3-year-old girl who just wanted to be wanted. You both did what you thought was right. Mom fought. You hid. Both of you were trying to protect me, just in different ways. Both of you failed, but both of you tried. I stood up, walked to the water's edge, and I didn't throw the flag into the waves. That would have been dramatic but empty. Instead, I folded it properly the way I'd been taught in basic training, and I placed it back in my car. Not as a burden. As a reminder that love is complicated, that family is messy, that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who loved us in ways we couldn't understand until it was too late. 3 months later, I returned to Arlington. Not for a funeral this time, but just to visit. I brought flowers, purple irises, my mother's favorite, according to a letter I'd found in my father's files. I placed them on her grave first. Hi, Mom. I'm sorry it took me so long to find you. I wish I'd known you. I wish you'd gotten to see me grow up. But I want you to know that I'm okay. I'm strong. I'm a fighter like you. And I'm going to make sure your story isn't forgotten. Then I walked to my father's grave. The headstone was simple. Robert James Morgan, General, United States Marine Corps. Dates of service. No epitaph. I placed the lieutenant's insignia he'd left me on top of the stone. I forgive you, Dad. Not because you earned it. Not because what you did was right. But because carrying this anger is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I'm done with poison. I'm done with ghosts. You loved me the only way you knew how, and that's going to have to be enough. A week later, I stood in front of a classroom at the Marine Officer Training School, looking at 60 faces eager to learn what it meant to be a leader. This was my new assignment. Teaching the next generation. Leadership isn't about making perfect choices, I told them. It's about making the best choice you can with the information you have, and then living with the consequences. My father was a general, a decorated war hero. He made choices that saved lives and choices that destroyed them. He wasn't a villain and he wasn't a saint. He was human. Just like you. Just like me. I paused, looking at each face, seeing my own journey reflected in their uncertainty. Some of you are going to make mistakes that haunt you for the rest of your lives. Some of you are going to face impossible choices where every option is wrong. And when that happens, I want you to remember this. Your worth isn't defined by your perfect record. It's defined by what you do after you fail, how you rebuild, how you make amends, how you turn your worst moments into something that serves others. After class, a young lieutenant approached me. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Of course. How do you forgive someone who doesn't deserve it? I thought about my father, about my mother, about all the years of anger and pain and slowly earned understanding. You don't forgive them because they deserve it. You forgive them because you deserve peace. Forgiveness isn't about them. It never was. It's about choosing to carry love forward instead of hate. That's the only way we break the cycle. That night, I sat in my small apartment at Camp Lejeune looking at the framed photograph I'd finally allowed myself to display. My mother and father, young and hopeful before the war and the secrets and the tragedy. And next to it, my Navy Cross and the locket my mother had given me. For EGM, always safe. I wasn't safe. Not really. None of us are. But I was free. Free from the lies. Free from the anger. Free to choose who I wanted to be, not based on what was done to me, but based on what I chose to do next. I picked up my phone and called the foundation office. This is Major Carter. I want to double the number of scholarships we're offering next year. And I want to start a mentorship program pairing recipients with active duty Marines who can guide them. Can we make that happen? We could. We did. 3 years after my father's death, the Sarah Morgan Foundation had helped over 200 military children. The Washington Post did a follow-up story wanting to interview me about the impact of the program. The reporter asked me, "Do you think your father would be proud of what you've built?" I considered the question carefully. I think my father spent his whole life trying to protect me from danger. But what I needed wasn't protection. I needed to know I mattered. I think my mother understood that. This foundation isn't about my father's pride. It's about my mother's love and making sure no child ever feels the way I did. That they're disposable. That they don't deserve to be fought for. So you've forgiven him. I've made peace with him. That's not quite the same thing. Forgiveness is complicated when the person who hurt you is gone. You don't get the apology you need. You don't get the explanation that makes sense of everything. You just get the choice to keep carrying the weight or to put it down. I chose to put it down. Today I'm still a Marine. Still teaching. Still running the foundation. I visit my parents' graves once a month, bringing flowers and updates on the lives they helped create through their sacrifice, even if they never meant to make that sacrifice. And sometimes when I'm alone, I take out that old photograph of my father holding me as an infant. I don't see a villain anymore. I don't see a hero either. I see a man who is doing his best in an impossible situation. I see fear and love and failure and hope all mixed together in the complicated mess that is human existence. I wish he'd made different choices. I wish I'd had the childhood I deserved. I wish my mother had lived to see me become the woman she would have been proud of. But wishing doesn't change the past. Action shapes the future. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you're carrying anger towards someone who hurt you, someone who made choices that damaged your life, I'm not going to tell you to forgive them. That's your choice to make, and it's not an easy one. But I will tell you this: don't let their mistakes define your entire story. Don't let what they took from you prevent you from building something beautiful with what you have left. Your life is yours, not theirs. Yours. Take it back. Have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you thought you knew about yourself? Drop your story in the comments. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe, because I'm going to keep sharing these stories of survival and strength and the messy, complicated journey toward healing. We're all in this together, fighting our own battles, carrying our own flags. Semper Fi, friends. Always faithful. To the truth. To justice. To ourselves. And sometimes when we're strong enough to forgiveness,